Okay, story time. It's the middle of the night. It's 3:14. I recently listened to a book called The Dip by Seth Godin, and it really sparked my curiosity as it pertains to our filmmaking journey, but specifically this film. So, quick synopsis of the book. He describes three sort of separate paths. One is called the dip, one's called the cul-de-sac, and one's called a cliff. A cul-de-sac is one of those things where it's just stuck in a sort of a loop. You're expending energy in things that are ultimately a waste of your resources. Those are the things that you just need to sort of cut your losses and get back out as fast as you can. Then he calls the cliff. The cliff is the thing that the only way to get out of it is usually by going off the cliff. He describes like when you start smoking cigarettes, they're specifically designed to, the longer you smoke them, the more addictive they become. So the only way to get away from that habit is a massive life change or death. It's kind of the only two options that you have. But then he describes something he calls the dip. And this is what really spoke to me about this film in particular. The dip is the difference between that first time you tried it and it was intriguing, that beginner's luck, and the consistent excellence that is repeatable, right? So it's, you go out on a pickleball court and you try it for the first time and you do all right. But even if you could go out and do that once or twice against best athletes, unless you go through the dip, which is the deep learning process, it's like, okay, this intrigues me enough that I'm gonna now sink back in and learn everything I can to build back up and get out of this dip so that I have consistent, repeatable excellence. That's the dip. It's the distance between when I first became intrigued or I first had a taste of this enjoyment and I've become quote unquote excellent at the thing that I'm trying to excel at. So we've been making like full-length feature films for I think 12 years, somewhere maybe more than that at this point. And ultimately, like, they don't make any money, like, at all. The first one made a small amount of money. Think a used car, not a nice, like, newer used car, like a used car. And that's the most money any film has made in 12 years. That was in 2011. So for me, I've spent the last 12 years grappling with and trying to figure out, am I in the dip or am I in a cul-de-sac? Or is this a cliff? Is this just gonna put me in an early grave? Because it's so stressful sometimes. And I was in this conversation this fall, really like seeking God, asking him like, is this a good use of my energy still? Like, is this like a cul-de-sac and I'm wasting time and resources and I could just better spend those resources and time somewhere else? Or is this just a dip? Because what characterizes the dip is you have to be willing to press through the dip because you have the belief that like you're committed enough to the excellence that could come on the other side that you're willing to fight through that awkwardness of that 10,000 hours of excellence to become a master of something, right? And I was really asking the Lord, like, man, am I missing, like, nothing is beginning to, like, take shape. Nothing is beginning to, like, materialize. We've been at this for, man, well over a decade. Am I in a dip or am I in a cul-de-sac? And that's really a question you have to ask. You have to be able to answer that question. But what I'll say is, if you're confident that you're in a dip, then the only logical solution, and Godin even goes into this in the book, you have to bear down and you have to power through because everyone else is going to quit in the dip. The dip is meant to separate those who will from those who won't. And what I ultimately found fascinating is while I'm grappling with that question, asking God to just answer, like, is this a dip or is this a cul-de-sac? Suddenly, I remembered an account that we had submitted this film, I Love Christmas Parties, through that I had forgotten about for a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years. I opened it, and in that account, that film in 1 year made more than probably every other film we've made in the last 12, 13 years combined. It was officially the most profitable thing we've ever done. Now, again, think used car. Nobody's getting Maseratis at this point, and every dime we make is going back into the next project. But all of that money is from Tubi. That's why we're big on you watching it on Tubi, because Tubi pays filmmakers the best of anybody in the game. But as I'm having that conversation, asking God, if this is worth pushing through, I suddenly find that. Now, money's not the metric, but it was a moment where I was just desperate to know. And the better part of it, the thing I think is even more a metric, is he showed me that money the day before the 3-year anniversary of when we started. Meaning on October 13th, 2020, we had the idea that turned into this film. And on October 12th, 2023, he led me to that account on that day to show me that not only was it a dip, but I think we're on the upswing. Not long after that, man, the next few weeks, we finally crested 1,000 subscribers. Who knows how long it's going to take for us to get the 4,000 watch hours that it takes to actually monetize your YouTube channel. That's not the point. The point is we buried ourselves in doing what we thought was right. We took our best chance for over a decade, believing that we were doing it for the right reasons, checking our heart and changing our path whenever we recognized that we didn't have the right motives, just trying to change course. And we're finally, after, man, it could be 13, 14 years, finally beginning to see some fruit after all these years. So my point is, sometimes you're at 20 hours out of a 24-hour challenge, and you're just not sure whether or not you have what it takes to push through to that last little bit. Now you got to decide, is this a dip? Is this a valid use of my energy? Or is this something that's wasting energy that could be used somewhere else? You got to know the answer to that. And ultimately, I've found the only way for me to know that is to go to the Lord and ask Him that. But once you know that, bear down, power through, because the last little bit, it might be the hardest. The next few hours are probably going to be the hardest. But we have never been closer to the end than we are now. And that's very exciting.